Our team have been attending the Maritime Safety Committee 109 at the IMO this week, representing the views of our members and advocating the importance of safety and professional standards for those working ashore and at sea. And one of the key agenda items of this session is the use of alternative fuels in ships to meet the industry's greenhouse gas reduction targets. Now, as industry explores the use of new technologies and alternative fuels such as methanol, ammonia and hydrogen, a key focus area for the Nautical Institute is how to optimise the safety of seafarers from an operational perspective. And with me today is the best person from our team who can talk to you about this and the importance of maintaining those high safety standards through the right training. Jeff, you are the head of Maritime Safety and Environment, and you've been part of the discussions all week at the IMO. How was this session for you?
Thank you very much for your generous invitation to attend the IMO. It was a generous offer to attend as a delegate of the Nautical Institute at the IMO in this very important week. So Maritime Safety Committee 109 had a specific remit for greenhouse gas safety. That is the name of one group. And in that, there is a working group 2, and I was the delegate at working group 2. And it was a tremendous experience, and I consider it a career privilege to actually be in the room to see how legislation is formatted and how it is arrived at.
What were the highlights for you this week?
The highlights were the specifics that were discussed, the way they drilled down to minutiae to phrase and agree on every word of legislation. It was a process I had never experienced and I wasn't aware of, and mariners will not be aware how much emphasis is placed on framing every word, every sentence, every paragraph that they then have to comply with. It was a very interesting experience.
Can you give us some examples of some of the things that struck you?
Yes, I can. Well, actually, an interesting one were containers. Containers that have been allocated for carrying electric power packs or battery packs for fuel. So these power packs are going to be part of the main propulsion system of the ship. And the point was raised that the containers that these electric power packs come in are not cargo, and therefore they do not fall under container cargo regulations for construction and design. So therefore, what rules apply to them? Well, there aren't any rules currently because these power packs have previously not existed. So what rules do they fall under, and do they therefore affect the ship's tonnage regulations? And all these considerations which, as a seafarer, you wouldn't normally expect to have considered. The containers would arrive on the quay and they would be installed with no consideration to the regulations that the container must comply with.
So what were the big technological surprises for you this week then?
Technological surprises, in particular, was the definition of gaseous fuels. At what point is a gaseous fuel a gas or a liquid? And again, every single detail had to be discussed and agreed by the member state delegates. It is quite incredible the way they drill into every aspect. What units are relevant? Is it megapascals or is it kilopascals? I mean, it's quite astonishing the detail that the IMO experts actually they dive into.
In terms of the most important things that you heard discussed this week, can you just elaborate for the members where some of those other discussions drilled down and what particularly for the members struck out?
So they principally concentrated on electric power packs. And then we looked at the main contenders of alternative fuels, which are ammonia, methanol, and hydrogen. And these are the principal candidates for alternative fuels entering service in the next few years. In fact, methanol is already with us, and there are now some ammonia ships being built. Hydrogen is somewhere behind on development, but nonetheless, those three fuels are the key frontrunners at this time.
So in terms of implications for training, where do we go from here?
Well, training, this throws up a very interesting question, because all of these fuels, these three main fuels, they throw up an elevated operational and environmental risk because there is no operational data currently in existence because these fuels haven't previously existed. And they are all hazardous. They are all hazardous, and therefore our concerns as the members' organisation for seafarers is how these hazards and environmental risks will affect our seafarers.
So let's talk about some of those hazards. Say, for example, methanol. Where are the principal seafarer hazards in this?
So methanol is considered slightly less hazardous than, say, ammonia, but nonetheless, it is a very hazardous substance. It is toxic. It can cause overexposure, can cause blindness. It can cause genetic issues to children from members. If it catches fire, it burns without a flame. So existing sensors for flames don't work or don't function very well. And it's highly toxic, so inert gas is needed. There is specific PPE required. There's a whole raft of new procedures, how you fight the fire. All kinds of issues have come up.
And how are we going to take that forward into the training environment?
So the Nautical Institute's position is that we need to have seafarers properly trained and familiarised before they step on board the ship. We say it is not good enough to have on board familiarisation.
Very significant. So it's all going to be shore-based training then?
We say so. That is our position, that there should be proper training courses structured around the fuel before seafarers are exposed to these new fuels.
That's really powerful, thank you. I believe that ammonia has got a few issues of its own as well as an alternative fuel. Can you describe some of those?
Well, ammonia is a well-known hazardous substance, although it's carried in bulk on LPG vessels around the world. The people who supervise the fuel as a cargo are highly experienced carriers in these fuels. It tends to be the deck officers. As in all bulk substances, they're highly experienced, well-trained. But when we talk about it as a fuel, it opens up a whole different category of seafarer because fuels are mainly dealt with by engineers, and they are not exposed to the transport of these substances. So we have to train all these people to a high degree, an elevated degree, in order to assume safe handling.
And are we going to need bespoke training facilities for this?
I believe there will have to be, because there will need to be operational units so they can get a hands-on experience. And it'll be hands-on, it'll be familiarity with specific PPE, tooling, emergency zones, emergency firefighting. These fuels are not a case of just throwing water around anymore.
So the last one, again, is a gas, hydrogen. Can you talk us through some of the specifics of hydrogen that have gathered your attention?
Okay, so hydrogen is not as far advanced as methanol and ammonia, but nonetheless, it is the third front runner. And in its gaseous state, you require 15 times the amount of bunker capacity of standard fuels. In its cryogenic state, it's around 3 to 5 times, which is still substantially more than the current fuels. However, in its cryogenic state, it is carried at minus 253 degrees C, only 20 degrees above absolute zero. It is the smallest molecule in the known universe. So if there is a leak in the system, hydrogen will find it, and it's highly inflammable.
And how do we train for that?
Well, how do we train for it? Indeed. Of course, there is current and present experience with cryogenic fuels with LNG. But LNG is carried at minus 160 C. This is a whole new area which no one has experience of.
And where do you see the regulations developing? How long is it going to take?
So currently there is the major driver in this is the UN Global Compact Maritime Just Transition Task Force. And that is a group driving for STCW revision. It is funded by Lloyd's Register, and the main stakeholders are the ICS and ITF. And as a stakeholder, we are a smaller stakeholder in the group, but we are in the room and we are following the developments. But the truth is that the IMO procedure, which I have now experienced this week, I could say it's glacial, but when you see how it needs to be absolutely nailed down before it becomes ratified and accepted by member states, is frankly years away. There is going to be no quick solution next year.
And are there dangers, therefore, in that gap between some of the ships coming out of build now and training probably being in place?
Yes, so the first ships coming online, and some of them are online, are methanol-powered ships. They tend to be dual fuel because there isn't enough methanol in existence for the ships to fuel at the end of their journeys. For example, Maersk have produced several container vessels which are dual fuel methanol, and when they go out to the Far East, they return on conventional fuel until the fuel supply is there. And they are also facilitating their own comprehensive training system because there is no other training system.
So let me get this right. So in a dual fuel ship, you're going to have seafarers that can cope with the alternative high hazard fuel, as well as their existing training in heavy fuel oil, diesel, and other things like that. This is going to be quite a complex thing for them to work through.
That is correct. That is exactly the right thing. And I believe the ammonia-fueled ships, and some of those orders have now been given to build these ships, they will also be initially dual-fuel vessels.
So that means that training is going to be new and additional training rather than replacing existing training.
That's correct. They cannot need to learn more on top of what they already know. And it cannot be generic training. It has to be specific training. So you can't do an alternative fuels generic course on ammonia, methanol, and hydrogen. You will need to do a specific course because it's so intense. There's so much knowledge that is required that previously there is none.
Great. So what exactly have the Nautical Institute been doing in this space in terms of developing standards for this?
Okay, so what we have identified is a serious gap in training standards between now, where there is nothing, and the future STCW ratification, which is years away. And I might say that even if it's 3 to 4 years for interim is not STCW accepted. So it wouldn't be a couple of years on top of that. And each fuel will be ratified independently. They won't be done as one. So each fuel will be taken independently and will come online through IMO at different timescales. So the Nautical Institute, having identified that there is a gap, that there is an elevated operational and environmental risk to our seafarers, has decided to produce its own broad brush training standard as a guide to maritime educators and as a guide to other agencies such as surveyors or those involved with training to allow them to focus on training. So we've developed a training standard for these three fuels that will give a broad brush introduction to these fuels, and then as the years go past and STCW becomes more prescriptive and defined, our standard can be edited and narrowed to fit in with what is being developed.
So effectively, we've created a baseline which we hope the IMO and possibly industry is going to be using?
Well, whether the IMO will use it, I'm not sure, but we have been distributing it at the IMO this week. And I was really pleased to see across the plenary the bright green cover of our training standard, which is a voluntary training standard, across various desks in front of me.
Where would you like to see industry take this?
I would like to see, in particular, flag states agree that this is a necessary move and to advise the current training providers, some of which are private, some of which are state, to say, well, in lieu of the fact there is nothing, the Nautical Institute voluntary training standard for handling alternative fuels is the best option that there currently is.
Mindful of this is still quite new at the moment, in terms of introduction, what do people need to do, or where can they get better information in terms of a basic introduction to alternative fuels?
Well, there are some familiarization courses out there, not many, and I say that because there must be more than our own. We provide a familiarization course, and we do it at different levels, at a 1 day, a 3 day, depending on what you need to take away from it. It is actually a generic familiarization course because it isn't intended to train seafarers to handle these fuels. It's intended to educate those in the maritime industry who need to have knowledge about these fuels for their ships.
And do you feel that knowledge is starting to spread as adequately as it should, or is there more to do?
There's a lot more to do, and there's a lot more to do and a lot more to learn. And those companies and agencies such as class surveyors and class surveyors, flag state surveyors, anybody who has business on these ships with these fuels really need to know what they are walking into. They need to understand the risk that does exist on these ships.
Wow. Do you see the risk going down or being properly mitigated over time?
Over time, we have to hope it will improve. Initially, there has to be incidents.
Anything else you think the members need to be aware of in terms of alternative fuels at this stage? Because I am going to get you back.
Well, only to be aware of the rapid developing situation. From COP26 in Glasgow in 2021 to where we are now, it is gaining traction and it is going to become much more aggressive in our drive to zero carbon emissions for 2050 targets.
Jeff, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I've learned an enormous amount just chatting with you today. I'm really grateful for your support at the IMO this week. You've taken a great burden off me as the head of delegation. Thanks very much for this one. And you're going to be coming back.
Thanks, Chris. It's my absolute pleasure.